High above the Hudson River, hidden among trees and steep cliffs in the town of Rosedon, New York, stand a structure that was never meant to be quiet. It was built to dominate. It was built to announce wealth. And it was built by a man who believed his fortune would never end. This structure is Dundas Castle, a gilded age without limits. At the turn of the 20th century, America was ruled not by kings, but by industrial titans. Railroads connected the nation. Steel, coal, and banking created fortunes larger than any royal treasury in Europe. And for men who controlled these systems, wealth was not measured in comfort. It was measured in permanence. That was the world in which Ralph Thomas Thomas rose to power. The man behind the castle. Ralph Thomas Thomas was not born into aristocracy. He was a railroad executive, a financier, and a corporate strategist. He made his fortune through control of railway lines that carried coal, freight, and passengers across the northeastern United States. In the Gilded Age, railroads were not transportation. They were empires, and Thomas sat near the center of one. Why a castle? Wealth in this era demanded visible proof. Railroad magnates did not build modest homes. They built mansions, estates, palaces, but Ralph Thomas Thomas wanted something different. He wanted a castle, not a European ruin, not a decorative fantasy, a real fortress, stone, towers, and walls, rising over the Hudson like a medieval seat of power. It would be his statement to the world. I'm not temporary. Choosing the Hudson Valley. The Hudson River had long been America's corridor of elite power. Astor Estates, Vanderbilt properties, industrial mansions. The river symbolized commerce, wealth, and national movement. Thomas chose a high cliff overlooking the river. From there, the castle would be visible to trains, ships, and travelers. Everyone would see it, and everyone would know. Construction begins. In the early 1900s, construction of Dundas Castle began. It was built of heavy stone and concrete. Massive towers were planned. Fortified walls were raised. The design borrowed heavily from European medieval castles, not for defense, but for symbolism. This was architecture meant to project dominance. A monument before it was a home. Unlike traditional homes, Dundas Castle was never designed around comfort first. It was designed around impact. The structure rose quickly. Its towers pierced the skyline. Its silhouette became unmistakable. But inside, the house was unfinished. Rooms lacked detail. Interiors remained incomplete. Function lagged behind form. Thomas was focused on what the castle represented, not how it would feel to live inside it. A fortune at its peak. At the time construction began, Thomas was among the wealthy elite. Railroad stocks were booming. Industrial profits were enormous. The future looked endless. There was no reason to worry. And in that confidence, Dundas Castle grew. A risk he did not see. What Thomas did not anticipate was how quickly fortunes could reverse. Railroads were powerful, but they were also volatile. Corporate battles, lawsuits, and market shifts could destroy even the strongest empires. The castle rose, but beneath it, the foundation of Thomas's wealth was already beginning to crack. A fortress built on assumption. Dundas Castle assumed one thing above all else: that the future would resemble the present. It assumed money would keep flowing, power would remain, control would endure. History does not honor such assumptions. The castle before the fall, before any collapse, Dundas Castle already stood partially complete. Its towers were visible. Its walls were real. Its ambition was undeniable, but its interior remained empty. like a promise not yet fulfilled, the shape of overconfidence. Thomas had built a symbol before he built a home. That order matters, because symbols require belief, and belief can disappear faster than stone, a structure waiting for a life. As construction continued, Dundas Castle waited for the moment when Thomas would move in and claim it. That moment would never come. When construction of Dundas Castle began in the early 20th century, it did so under one assumption: money would never stop. That assumption shaped everything. The scale of the project, the materials chosen, and the absence of restraint all reflected the mindset of America's Gilded Age, a period when the wealthiest believed the future belonged to them. A castle in a new world. Unlike European castles built for defense, Dundas Castle was designed purely for symbolism. Its thick stone walls were not meant to repel armies. Its towers were not meant to watch for invasion. They were meant to project authority. Ralph Thomas wanted a building that looked as though it had stood for centuries, even though it was brand new. He wanted history without waiting for time. Materials chosen for permanence. The castle was constructed of heavy stone, reinforced concrete, thick masonry. This was not decorative architecture. It was weight. The walls were massive. The towers were solid. The structure was intended to survive long after its owner. Ironically, the building would outlive the fortune that created it. No expense was meant to be spared. The castle's exterior was prioritized first. Thomas wanted the silhouette to be visible from the Hudson River, passing trains, neighboring estates. Even unfinished, the building announced dominance. But interior spaces remained raw. This reflected Thomas's focus. Impress first, inhabit later. A building without a floor plan. Like many Gilded Age projects driven by ego rather than use, Dundas Castle lacked a finalized interior plan. Rooms were sketched. Layouts were revised. Functions remained vague. This was not unusual among ultra-wealthy builders. They assumed time would allow refinement. They assumed they would always be there to finish. The cost of scale. Though exact construction costs are lost to history, contemporary estimates suggest Dundas Castle consumed millions of dollars, equivalent to tens of millions today. This was not investment. It was assertion. The castle did not generate income. It did not serve a business purpose. It existed solely to display. A house that could not be sold. From the beginning, Dundas Castle was impractical. Its design was too specific. Its location was too dramatic. Its structure was too fortress-like. If Thomas ever needed to sell it, few buyers would exist. But he did not consider that. Gilded Age wealth did not plan for loss. The castle rises, the market shifts. As construction progressed, the railroad industry began to change. Competition increased. Legal battles grew. Government regulation tightened. The days of unchecked expansion were ending. Thomas did not slow the castle. He believed his empire was immune. A monument built too late. Dundas Castle was being built at the exact moment when the Gilded Age began to unravel. Labor movements gained strength. Public scrutiny increased. Financial instability loomed. The castle was a monument to an era already passing. The paradox of wealth. The castle revealed a paradox. The more money Thomas spent, the less flexibility he had. The structure locked him into a vision that required continued prosperity. When prosperity faltered, the castle became a burden, the illusion of control. From a distance, Dundas Castle looked powerful. Up close, it was vulnerable. It depended entirely on one man's fortune. And fortunes do not last forever. A building waiting for completion. By the time cracks began forming in Thomas's financial life, the castle was far from finished. It had walls. It had towers. It did not yet have a soul. It was a stage without a play. When money is no longer infinite. Every day the castle grew. Thomas's financial situation became more complicated. Investments failed. Legal disputes multiplied. Pressure mounted. The castle did not pause. And that was its greatest mistake. A fortress with no defense. Ironically, for all its strength, Dundas Castle had no defense against the one force that mattered. Economic collapse. The moment before everything changed. By the time Thomas realized his fortune was no longer secure, it was too late. The castle was already too big. The debt was already too deep. And the dream was already irreversible. For all its towers and walls, Dundas Castle never fulfilled the one purpose that gives a building life. No one ever lived there. Ralph Thomas Thomas had built a fortress, but he had not built a home. And as his financial empire began to collapse, the distance between the two became fatal. When construction stopped, at some point between ambition and bankruptcy, work on Dundas Castle slowed, and then stopped entirely. There was no ceremony, no final stone placed, no completion. The workers left. The scaffolding came down. The structure remained. A castle without an ending. A vision that could not adjust. Thomas's mistake was not building too big. It was building something that could not adapt. The castle was too expensive to finish, too strange to sell, too symbolic to abandon. It existed in a category of one, and in that category, there was no exit. The financial collapse. Ralph Thomas Thomas's fortune unraveled through a combination of legal battles, railroad disputes, failed investments. By the 1910s, he was no longer among America's elite. His empire, once vast, was broken, and with it, the dream of Dundas Castle. Why he never moved in. Thomas never occupied the castle because it was never habitable. The interior was incomplete. Utilities were unfinished. Rooms were not functional. But more importantly, Thomas could not afford to make it livable. Every dollar spent would have deepened his losses. So the castle remained empty, a building that reflected its owner. Dundas Castle mirrored Thomas's fate. Grand on the outside, hollow within, dependent on a fortune that no longer existed. It was not a ruin yet. It was something worse, a failure frozen in stone. No one wanted it. After Thomas's financial ruin, the castle became a liability. Potential buyers saw an unfinished fortress, enormous maintenance costs, no practical use. The building had been designed to serve one ego. Without that ego, it had no market. The land outlasts the dream. The Hudson Valley remained valuable. The castle did not. Over time, ownership changed, but no one had the resources or the reason to complete it. The structure stood as a reminder of ambition that exceeded reality, a monument without purpose. Unlike other abandoned mansions that decayed quietly, Dundas Castle remained conspicuous. Its silhouette dominated the cliffs. It cannot be ignored, and yet it served no one. From fortress to ruin, without maintenance, the building began to deteriorate. Water entered, stone cracked, vegetation crept inward. The castle slowly transformed from statement to skeleton, the ghost of an empire. Dundas Castle did not become haunted by spirits. It became haunted by failure. The failure of a man who believed wealth was permanent. The failure of an era that trusted money more than history. A house that never lived. Most abandoned homes carry echoes of people. Dundas Castle carries none. It was empty from the beginning. which makes its silence heavier. The shape of a lost dream. Standing inside the castle today, one does not feel tragedy. One feels interruption, a story that was never allowed to finish. When ambition outruns reality, Thomas had tried to build something eternal. What he built instead was proof that nothing is. When Ralph Thomas lost control of his railroad empire, Dundas Castle did not simply lose its patron. It lost its future. What followed was not immediate destruction, but something more final. Irrelevance. The fall of a Gilded Age titan. Thomas's financial collapse was not dramatic in public. It happened through courtrooms, paperwork, and debt. Railroad investments failed. Corporate lawsuits drained capital. Creditors closed in. The man who had once commanded vast networks of steel and steam was reduced to defending himself legally. The castle had no place in these battles. It was only a cost, a property no one could claim. As Thomas's finances unraveled, Dundas Castle became entangled in legal uncertainty. Mortgages, liens, ownership disputes. The building was too expensive to finish and too symbolic to sell easily. So it remained in limbo. The end of construction forever. Once Thomas lost control, construction would never resume. No successor believed in the project. No investor wanted a half-built fortress on a cliff. Dundas Castle was officially dead, long before it was visibly ruined. A forgotten structure in a changing world. The 1920s and 1930s transformed America. Industry modernized. Wealth diversified. Public taste changed. Fortresses built to impress no longer mattered. Dundas Castle became invisible, not physically, but culturally, passing through neglect. Over decades, ownership passed quietly. Some hoped to develop the land. Others ignored the building entirely. No one took responsibility for restoration. The structure was simply left to weather. When history is not profitable, preservation requires purpose. Dundas Castle had none. It was not old enough to be historic, not beautiful enough to be romantic, not functional enough to be reused. So it was forgotten. The slow erosion of a dream. Rain eroded stone. Ice fractured walls. Plants rooted in cracks. The castle decayed as naturally as Thomas's reputation had faded, from symbol to ruin. By the mid-20th century, Dundas Castle was no longer seen as a monument. It was a curiosity, and curiosities do not receive funding. The loss of identity. Without a story, buildings lose identity. Dundas Castle became the ruins on the hill. Nothing more. A castle that could not die quickly. Its stone kept it standing. But standing does not mean living. The final absence. By the time historians took interest, much had already been lost. The castle was no longer a vision. It was a warning. Today, high above the Hudson River, the ruins of Dundas Castle remain exactly as Ralph Thomas left them. Not finished, not lived in, not redeemed. They stand as stone evidence of a belief that wealth could outrun time. A ruin without a past. Unlike European castles that carry centuries of human history, Dundas Castle carries almost none. No generations passed through its halls. No family gathered inside its walls. No memories were made there. It was a monument to a future that never arrived. Why it still stands. The castle survives not because it was loved, but because it was built too solidly to fall easily. Its stone walls resist decay. Its towers refuse collapse. But survival is not the same as meaning. A lesson in Gilded Age illusion. Dundas Castle reveals the greatest flaw of the Gilded Age. The belief that money equals permanence. Thomas believed that if he built large enough, history would bend around him. It did not. What the castle actually represents. Dundas Castle is not a story of ghosts. It is a story of hubris. A man believed his wealth was eternal. A structure was built to reflect that belief. The belief failed. The structure remained. The castle as a warning. Where other mansions became museums, Dundas Castle became a ruin. Not because it was lesser, but because it was too rigid. It could not adapt. A future without purpose. There is no clear plan for Dundas Castle. Restoration is impractical. Demolition is costly. Development is unlikely. So it waits, a stone record of overreach. Every crack in its walls is a reminder. Wealth can build walls, but it cannot guarantee relevance. Standing without apology. The castle does not ask to be remembered. It simply stands. The final meaning. Dundas Castle is what happens when ambition outruns reality. It is the Gilded Age, frozen at the moment it believed it would last forever.